back everyone to another PowerShell tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about functions in PowerShell. Basically a function is for code reuse, so you're not using the same code over and over. So without further ado, let's hit the shell. Alright, to start off, we'll go over to the functions folder and we're going to create a new file. This file is going to be a PS1 file, basically a script file for us. Later on we can get into modules. The syntax to create functions is the word function along with the function name. We usually use the PowerShell verb-noun standard, so we'll do write-hello for this example. And we'll go ahead and just write some output to the screen on this one. So we'll just do hi to all my subscribers. So we'll go ahead and load the code up within PowerShell. And once it's loaded, then you can call that function whatever you want. So we'll highlight the code first, and then we'll run it. It will load it into PowerShell, and then we can call that function or that commandlet, and you'll see the output. Hi to all my subscribers. Next, what we'll do is we're gonna work on parameters. So a parameter is something you can pass into a function. So think of it as making your function more dynamic. So for this example, we'll create a parameter, and that parameter we'll make it a string value, and we'll call it name. So we'll pass in a name to our function. So we'll say, make it dynamic, we'll say hi, whoever's name, and then let's write PowerShell. So once we have that written, we'll load it again because we changed our function. We're going to load it into code, and then we're going to go ahead and call our function. And one thing to note is if you call the function without passing the parameter, it will just pass it with no information. So as you can see here, there's no name, just hi blank comma, let's write PowerShell. Now, in the next example, you'll see that it added the value of our name, which is Matt. So one way around this is you can use mandatory parameters. And so basically with a mandatory parameter, you have to pass a value. So if you don't have a value there, or if you call the function without a parameter, it will prompt you for that parameter. So since we changed the function, we'll reload it, and then we'll call the function without a parameter again, and you'll notice that it's prompting me to type in the name. And then once I type in the name, it will give out the output. So that's the basics of a parameter for functions. Now, with the next example we'll create another file for our function, and this one will be a little bit more advanced. It won't be an advanced function. We'll get into those later. This is just over basic functions in general. So for this one, we'll do one called Get-ComputerInfo. And so this function here will get details of the computer, and then we'll keep adding on to it. So first we'll start with the syntax of function, and then our function name, which is get-ComputerInfo. And then you have your script braces, which everything inside the function. Right now, we won't use any parameters. We'll just do get WI object, and we'll pull some system information of the local system. So for this example, we'll go ahead and pull the disk information, and then we'll see the output. And basically, we'll pick and choose what we care about within this output. So we'll go ahead and load the function, and then we can call this function a test to make it sure it works. So when we do this, it's going to spit out the disk, and you can see that we have a C drive and a D drive. So with that, we can select what properties we really care about. So maybe the device ID, maybe the free space, and the overall size. So we'll go ahead and grab that information, we'll store it into a variable. And then what we'll do with that variable is we'll do for each, because we need for each disk. And so I know we haven't got into for each objects, but I'll break this one down. So we have disk info within the for each loop, and then each item as it goes through the for each loop is going to be passed into the $D variable. So the C drive with the device type, device ID, free space and size and volume would be in the D variable. And then once we're done with that data, it's going to go back through to the next set of disks, which is the D drive, and we would have a device ID, device type and stuff for that. So as you can see, in the custom object, we're specifying the D for the current item, and we're going to grab the device ID, So on the left side is our column header or our object header, and then on the right side is the value that we want to put in there. So now we're going to do the free space for the current item that's in D, and we'll go ahead and get the full space or the full size, and that will be $D.size. And you can see the property names on the right side in PowerShell that we're grabbing for this. Now, once we have this, we can go ahead and test the output. So we'll go ahead and just reload our function, and then we'll call it so we can see the output and make sure that it's looking like we want it to look. Now, if you notice that the free space and the disk size are not in human and readable format, so what we're going to do is we're going to divide it by 1 gigabyte, and this is basically going to put it in human readable format. So one thing to notice is I accidentally put it on device ID instead of size, so I'm going to go back and fix this real fast. This is a common mistake. You would have got an error message and then you would realize you did the wrong field. So we'll go ahead and add the divide by 1 gigabyte, and then once I get this in parentheses, we'll go ahead and run the function again to load it in code, and then we'll call the function to see the output. Now, one thing to notice is this isn't really 2 decimal points down. It gets a lot of details. So what I'll actually do is I'll work on trying to find a way to get this to round. But first we want to make sure we add some comments to our code so anybody that's coming in behind us can understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we'll go ahead and add some comments just so anybody coming behind us knows. So now what we'll do is we'll add the math.net, and we're going to call the method round, and this is going to round that number out, and we're just going to put the actual number within parentheses. Now I'm going to fast forward this because here I was trying to troubleshoot passing parameters. Basically, I get the syntax to round it, so there we go. So now we have the free space and the size. Now what we can do is we can actually specify the size in a string. One, I'm leaving this in because it's a good thing to notice is people make errors all the time. So you can't do this because it's going to basically try to put a string with a double. So notice in the error message it says system.double error. So that's because we're trying to do a double, which is a decimal point, and wrap it with a string. So what we'll do is we're going to wrap this whole thing and make it a string altogether. So we'll wrap everything in quotes, and then we'll do basically a sub expression, which is basically when you put a dollar and parentheses around it. So you'll see the color syntax change. So we'll wrap the actual logic around that. So to execute that code, but it will also make the output a string. So we'll do this in both of them. So now it's going to run the math round and then turn it all into a string. You'll see this online when you're looking up different code examples too. So we'll go ahead and run that, and we'll do Get-ComputerInfo, and there we go. So now we have the size. Now you could gigabytes in the title if you like. It's your choice. So next we'll add a computer name parameter. So we're going to make this function a little bit more sophisticated. So we'll make it to where you can run it against remote computers. Also, you could run it against multiple computers. So we're going to add a parameter, and that parameter is going to be computer name. It'll be a string value. And if you want to pass in multiple computers, there's a special syntax you have to do with the string as well. So first things first, we need to load our code and test it out. One thing I did mess up on was I forgot to provide the computer name variable after the parameter on line 5. So this basically prompted me, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that now. So I'm going to add the computer name, and then we'll cancel out the prompt. We'll reload our function, and we'll test. And we're going to run it against localhost. So we're going to run it against localhost, and you can see it spit out the information. Now what we'll do is we'll make computer name allow multiple computer names, so the 2 brackets mean it accepts multiple strings, and then we can add our for each loop in here for each computer. So we're going to do a for each computer on a for each disk, because it'll be a for each and a for each. So we'll go ahead and add our for each computer, and then we're going to have all of the rest of our code within that for each loop. So now for each computer, it'll run the get.my object, it will run for each disk on that computer, and then we'll spit out the output. We'll go ahead and clean up our brackets. We'll go ahead and load our function back in. And also we'll have a computer name field in our output, so we know what computer name belongs to what disk. So this is helpful if you're doing it against multiple computers. And again, you could use another function later on to output this to a CSV file or whatever you like, some kind of reports. So we'll go ahead and run it against localhost, and you can see localhost. And then what I'll do next is we can run it against 2 computer names. Notice we got a bunch of output back. So this is where we know something's wrong. We need to figure out what. And if you notice on line 6, I have a syntax error. I'm using computer name. I never changed it to computer. So it's running it against all the computers in my list multiple times. So we'll change that to computer. And then we'll go ahead and reload our function. Again, trial and error. And what we'll do next is we'll run it and the output's good, but we'll get the actual computer name so we can see the difference for the computer names. So I'll use the environment variable computer name to get the name of my computer. We'll go ahead and throw that as a parameter for a computer name, and then you should see that name listed in our output table. So we'll go ahead and run it, and there you go. Thanks everyone, and that's all we have for today on functions. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.